To those waiting with bated breath for that favorite media catchphrase, the U-turn, I have only one thing to say. U-turn if you want to. The ladies, not for turning.
Welcome to the Fidelis Leadership Podcast, a place of learning for those who aspire to leadership excellence. Here's our host, Mike Etor.
Gary Nowak has more than 23 years of worldwide global management consulting experience, working with companies in the U.S., Europe, China, and Australia. His global consulting experience as a partner at a Big Four accounting firm has provided exposure to vibrant company cultures, both individuals and countries, strong executive personalities, several obstacles, multiple failures, and a great amount of success during his career. He now serves as an executive coach, helping his clients improve their leadership skills and prepare themselves for promotion to more senior roles. Gary also hosts a podcast called Coffeehouse Coaching, which was created to connect with other coaches and their clients, and also to provide professionals with a better understanding of what coaching is and how impactful it can be to them and their careers. And I've been following Gary for quite a while on social media. He has been there, done that. He's the real deal. Gary, I can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast. Welcome to the Fidelis Leadership Podcast.
Mike, the thank you comes from my side. Thank you for having me on. I like being on this side of the microphone where I'm not in charge, so I appreciate it.
Well, the intro, you have an impressive intro, and I just scratched a thimble's worth of it. Why don't you share the audience, both personally and professionally, what more do we need to know about Gary Nowak?
Well, thanks for that. And I like the question because I feel, I'm a bit atypical. Where I grew up, it was probably lower middle class. And I went to a community college for 2 years and then a secondary business college. And the reason I mention that, a lot of the wonderful leaders out there went to, the Harvards of the world or massive universities that take with them. And I think because I did have a humble background and I didn't go to a big university, that formed me in my way in my career to be what I would call a grinder. I recognize that, behind me isn't University of Michigan, it's a couple smaller schools. And what was my value? And my value was my attitude and my ability to roll up my sleeves and get things done. I think throughout my career, that's what I've focused on. And that's what I tried to do to get jobs, to be willing to do everything, to, have the right attitude for somebody and not have just a perspective that's below me or I shouldn't do that. Because honestly, and one thing I do like to point out to younger people is my career really didn't start till I was 30. And that was with Arthur Andersen. Up until in my 20s, I was grinding away. I was a receptionist. I had lower level jobs, wasn't making a lot of money, but I just stuck with it. And eventually good things happened and I figured my way. So yeah, if there's anything to know, I don't come from a massive background with either education, but that helped form who I was and help the leader that I am and the way I got through my career.
I love that. And we have very similar backgrounds in that regard. Same way, lower middle income class, great parents, but there wasn't a lot of money. I joined the Marines right out of high school, enlisted, did 4 years, and found that I was surrounded in a leadership laboratory. Went to college, served another 20 as an officer. And then much like yours, my corporate career started when I was 42 years old. And I knew little about business, but I realized within weeks, leadership is leadership, and I was a phys ed major. So same thing. I went to a state college, phys ed major. And I'll just say this, I'm a bit of a smart ass. I've written a large book as a textbook, and I talk about the difference between leadership experts and expert leaders. And I have found that, and I've read all the books, the leadership gurus out there, and many of them they have the pedigrees, they have, bachelor's and a doctorate from schools that I would have never gotten into. But if you really peel back, and I've read their books and I've learned a lot from them, but if you look at an alarmingly high percentage of them have very little actual leadership experience other than being a CEO of their own company. So I tell people, I've got a couple of graduate degrees, but I am not a leadership expert. I can't quote all those theories. I do claim to be an expert leader. I think I can go into any situation, at least initially, ask the right questions. The answers are almost always within the organization, and I usually I can make things better, you know. And when I say that to people, they're like, "I never thought about that," you know. I said, you know, cast a wide net, but never be overly impressed with somebody's credentials, because I'm sure you're the same way, Gary. And then we'll get on with it. I say if there was a bell curve of leadership in corporate America, the guys with legitimate pedigrees are in ample numbers at both ends of the spectrum. The unbelievably effective to, I can't believe this guy went to that school. You just, you know. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I'll shut up on that. Anything else you'd like to share with the audience about your background?
No, just a point. You know, and it's always hindsight is 2020. And when I'm living my career, going through my career, I didn't really quite know what I was doing. And now stepping away from it, becoming an executive coach and looking back, all I wanted to do was go see the world. And it didn't matter how. I went to management consulting because that's a wonderful vehicle to go see the world. You go to different clients and they pay for, you know, flights and hotels, and you can stay in cities. So in that, I probably spent 9 years living outside the U.S. in various places, and I absolutely loved it. And the clarity that I got, even though it's in the rearview mirror, anybody that looks back, there's this big aha moment and a sense of relief in your body, like, that's why I did that. That's why I was doing that. Because in the midst of my career, if you'd asked me what I was doing, well, I'm a partner. I'm helping, you know, clients solve problems. I am adding to their EBITDA. I'm doing all these other things, but that wasn't what I was doing. What I was doing was very selfish, and I know we might talk about this, was with my career is just going and seeing the world. And I always say, if you're selfish, there's a knock-on effect of that. There's an unintended consequence that being selfish with you, you're going to be better for the people that you're working with. You're going to be better for the companies that you're consulting. You're going to be better for everybody that's in your orbit.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yes. We've alluded to it. So, you know, you're currently an executive coach. What is are you by yourself, solo practitioner? Do you have other people working with you? Who are your clients, and what do you do for them?
Okay, so here's the deal. I got certified about 4 years ago. I went to Hudson Institute of Coaching, wonderful place to go. And I love working in a team. I don't like being a solopreneur. I don't like doing my own thing, and I've done that for several years. And it's fine. I like the coaching, but what I really like is collaborating with other coaches and working in groups. So what I'm creating, in the process of creating, we're on the beginning stages, is something called Your Next Chapter. And what I'm doing is I'm working with 6 other coaches that are in a similar position as I am, that like to collaborate with others, that like to talk to each other. And we are working with clients who are in the process of trying to figure out what is next in their life. Could be their career, could be retirement, could be anything. And the program that I'm creating is getting 6 of these individuals together. I will coach them in group with other coaches to help them figure out what they want to do next. Now, the key, I think, to this, personally for me, is I get to work with other coaches, which I love, because I like dialoguing, I like brainstorming with others. But the second is I like coaching groups, because I think that's where I shine. And when I look back at my career with management consulting, that's what we do. We work in groups. Yeah. We work with different personalities. So, and I firmly believe once you get a group of people together that have a common thread of everybody in that group is determined to try to assess and figure out what is next for them. So they're all sitting down with a common bond of that. There's a common denominator to that. And I really believe in community. I believe in working with 5 other people. I believe in talking out what you're thinking. And the other 5 people that are listening to this person are going to say, oh, I never thought of doing a Sage letter, or that Peak Valley. It's interesting how that person was impacted by that. So I'm in the process of creating that, because for me, it fulfills everything to work with other coaches and to work with groups of people to support their journey and to try to figure out what's next. And what I would say is I didn't love my career. I liked it, as I said earlier, because it got me to see the world. But I burned out about 4 times because I didn't love being a management consulting partner. It just wasn't in me. And with executive coaching, I love executive coaching, and I love this aspect of it. And if you're familiar with the happiness curve, I'm on the bottom. We're trending up at our ages, in your 50s, 60s. We're trending up on the happiness curve. So now we're leaning into what really makes us happy. And what I want to help people with is what I found was finding my encore career. So as I work with 6 other people, I want to create a space, a process for them to discover what's next in their life.
Yeah, I love that, and we're identical in that. I loved being a Marine, and I loved being an executive in a publicly traded company. But I retired, Gary. I had done well. I just thought, now I'm just, I'm going to work out and chill out. Within the first year of retiring from K-Force, the public company, I probably had lunch or coffee with 25 people the first year, and I realized I was coaching. So I hung my shingle out, took off immediately, and I went from I'll never work again to I will never stop doing this as long as I breathe air. I just love it. So like you, it seems my purpose on earth is to help other leaders grow during and after my lifetime. And how are you going to do it after your lifetime? Well, you got to leave books, you got to leave videos, you got to leave content and all of that, And I'm vain enough to think that maybe somebody will want to watch it 50 years from now, who knows, But I hear you on the happiness curve and all that. I'm older than you, I suspect. I'm going to be 70 my next birthday, blessed with unbelievable amounts of energy and all of that. And I can't wait to wake up in the morning to do this stuff. I just love it. So anyway, enough about me. Somebody spots you after this podcast or after any podcast in a public building, you're up in an elevator, he's not going to have exposure to you too much. He says, Gary, I know you get much time, got 20 seconds. What's your basic philosophy of leadership? What would you tell them?
What I would say very quickly is it's something that you already have that you need to nurture. Be a great listener and ask good questions. Every great leader that I've been around is pausing. They're listening. They're taking things in. I reflect on Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, where you live in a growth mindset. I think a lot of leaders have a fixed mindset, and they have this perspective that they have to have all the answers. So what I would say to somebody is to be a great leader, to have a good philosophy on leadership, is to listen really well and ask the right questions.
Yeah, thank you for that. I want to throw this out to you. So I've got a good leadership background, just like you do, different channels, obviously. And I tell people, anyone that'll listen, I did well. I did well as a leader in the Marines and in corporate America. And I said, but I got to be honest with you, there's one skill that I wish, first of all, I knew it was a skill. And secondly, I got good at it earlier. And that is the skill of listening, the art of listening. Because I'm a type A meat eater, and I usually have all the answers. And I realized only when I got exposed to a couple of the guys that you're talking about, the great leaders, to where, man, this guy will let me talk in our one-on-one meeting for 30 minutes. And he's just listening. And then at the end, he said, all right, Mike, you done? Okay, early on you said this. Now let's talk about, they're just listening. And I realized, wow, I'm good at the science of leadership, but that's an artful technique right there that I wish I would have known earlier. Any second thoughts on that?
The only thing I would say to your listeners and to people is recognize when somebody listens to you, what happens to you. Mm-hmm. If they don't interrupt you, they give you space, and they might ask, what else? What else should I know? And pausing and giving you space. See how you feel about that person. That's a good homework exercise for those listening, because everybody wants a little bit of homework now and then.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, what you're alluding to is human nature. We love to hear our names, and we love to hear ourselves talk. And so if a guy's providing you with that opportunity, and obviously the body language is good, he's listening to you, values your input, seems to be gleaning, positive benefit from it. I don't know what the hormones are, but they're starting to run through your body at that point,
Listening is impactful to you. And one of the things I would point out, if you've ever been on stage speaking to a bunch of people, it could be 20 people, 50 people, 100 people, when you look out there and you find somebody that's really listening to you intently, that feels great because a lot of people are doing something else. They're not listening, they're looking at their phone. And hopefully you just bypass them. They may be listening. But when that person's really staring up and listening to you and giving you the positive affirmation with their body language, you're like, oh, I love that person. So something to think about.
No, I love that. That's a great tip as well to anybody that will go and speak in front of on stage or just in front of their small 5-man team. Well, the classic question I ask everybody at the beginning of these podcast interviews, Gary, is leaders born or made?
Well, you being from the military, I'd be curious of your answer. But because I thought about this question, and everybody thinks about that question. And where I get a perspective on this is, what is it that you're doing? If you're aligned to what it is that you're doing, you're going to be a great leader. And you may be born into that. But if you're trying to do something that isn't in your DNA, that you're not fully bought into, then you may not be. I look back at my career, and it is a leadership position, but I don't know that I was a good leader because I don't know that I loved it as much as I should. Now, go to where I am now with the executive coaching and the Your Next Chapter coaching. I think I'm a great leader because I'm showing all the traits that a great leader would show when you're managing 6 other coaches. And I'm recognizing the traits that I saw in other leaders that I saw back in my career that were really good at consulting, that liked it. And I think it really aligns to what it is that you're doing. If you're fully bought into it, it's just going to be natural. It's going to be in you. And then you pile on these skills to get better at it because you want to get better at it. I just think it's a firm foundational thing of if you're aligned to your purpose or your why, then you're going to be a good leader because you don't have a choice. You're like, no, I want to be better at this because I love it so much. You could be running a nonprofit and you just love everything that the nonprofit does. You're going to want to be a better leader at it because you're impacting so darn many people and it's so core to who you are and your belief. If you throw me doing something, I could tick the boxes on leadership, but if I'm not fully bought into it, like, am I really a good leader there? So I think it's, if you're aligned, alignment is big with leadership. If you're aligned to your purpose and what you're doing, it's not even a thought process. You're just going to start reading books, talking to people, asking questions.
Yeah, I agree with that. And for what it's worth, my take on this question is, much like when we were kids, your sister had musical ability. I did not. My other sister had mathematical ability. If it doesn't have a dollar sign in front of me, I'm probably not going to get that problem right, So my point is, I do think there are people born with a natural aptitude. Even among kindergartners, there's going to be 1 or 2 kids that emerge as the leaders of that pack. That said, I do think leadership is a learned skill. And I think anybody, even those who say, I'm not a leader, I don't even look like a leader, I don't think I'm a natural leader, I think anybody willing to put in the reps can become an effective leader. In fact, I think they can actually be called what I call the world-class leader. Don't have to be in a world-class organization. You could be in charge of the mailroom or the loading dock or whatever. But with practice, putting in the reps and getting good at the science and the art of leadership, I think everybody has the potential to be a really, really great leader. Any thoughts on that?
I do see the born part of it. I remember I worked in Arthur Andersen 30 years ago, and there was just an exercise with directors and partners and things, and we were meant to put something together, look at it, and then deconstruct it, and then re-put it together in a quick time frame. And what I noticed at a very junior level, I took charge, even though there were people that had higher titles than me. I was like, you're going to look after this, you're going to look after this, you're going to look after this. And when we decomposed it, I had my sticks that I had to put together, and each of the other people had their sticks. And I always remembered that I had a leadership trait that I kind of took control of what was going to happen. And it was natural and it was easy, and I didn't think about it like, ooh, this is a good time for me to show my leadership. It was born into me that I was willing to take charge of that.
Yeah, I agree with it. I think I had a little bit of that. And I've noticed that even among my children. I have 4 children. They're all different. And some have more natural leadership aptitude than others. I think there's a couple that would never, ever want to be a leader. I don't want to have to tell anybody they're not doing a good job. And there's a couple that have the potential to be really good leaders if they ever choose to go to that path. So I do agree. You've already told us about, your elevator pitch for your philosophy of leadership. How about letting us know, everybody's got a certain leadership style. What's Gary's leadership style?
What I like to think it is a lot of collaboration, is listening to everybody. I'm not a strategic thinker. I love brainstorming. I like hearing other people's opinions. There's something that I'm learning a bit about because I'm facilitating some leadership training with a professional services company. It's about followership. And followership follows what the leader above them dictates and embraces that and learns how to cascade that down to his team. And I went through this training. I was like, I was more of a follower leader than a leader. I didn't have the strategic, here's where we're going to go, here's what we're going to write. But when I did get direction from up top, I would take that and I would cascade that down to the team to say, this is the direction of leadership. This is how we should go. So, I would think that is a leadership trait of mine. I thoroughly enjoy building relationships with people. I can ice break people. I can meet somebody very quickly and try to get a connection. And I've learned that. I love collaborating with others, hence the executive coaching Your Next Chapter, working with other coaches and getting their perspective, making everybody feel heard. And you're going to hear that common theme of listening and asking questions. And one of the things I said, as you go through your career in professional services, as you get further up in the chain, up to partner, you don't have all the answers in a meeting. You're the one with the best questions, because you're further away from the detail. And even if you're sitting in front of a client, we feel as a consultant, you have to have all the answers. And I would push back on that. And this is hindsight reflection. I wish I would have asked better questions when I was a partner as they were talking to me about something, because that funnel, every question is clarity. Every question you ask, it's closer to what is it that they're talking about. And if you don't ask any questions, then you're answering something that isn't the mark, because the question wasn't clear. It was clear to them, but it didn't come through as clearly to you as it was for them. So asking questions to get clarity, I would like to think that's a leadership trait that I have.
Yeah, thank you. You've been around the world. You've got a rich background in leadership and leadership. So my point is, you have worked with, observed so many leaders. So I'm going to ask you this question. Of the very best of the best that you've seen, observed, studied, Gary, are there any traits, habits, skills that most of the very best seem to share in common?
Yep. Good question. And thanks for that. When I found a leader, a lot of management consulting, they hire you to confirm their decision. I know I want to go this direction, so I'm going to hire you. This is my thinking, and I need you to back it up with data and go interview people and all that, because I know the result. The best leaders I've seen were very curious. They held a curiosity mindset about them, that they didn't really have a preconceived destination of where this project or initiative was going to go, but they were thoroughly interested in the expertise that we were bringing in to listen to us as we presented. Now, in the curiosity mindset is listening, asking questions, and there's a whole heap load of silence, I think, with a good leader, of allowing space for people to communicate, because we've been in the executive world where we've been in meetings, and as soon as somebody stops talking, somebody else is jumping right in, which leads to all kinds of bad behavior, because there's no safe space. And I have to speak quickly, because once I take a pause to breathe, somebody else is going to pile in. But to get back to your question, having a curious mindset, listening deeply, questioning, how did you come to that conclusion? How did you come to this conclusion? Why are you believing that? You said this that time, and now you're saying this. Help me understand that. So I would say having a curious mindset is a great, wonderful leadership trait. And when you do that, what follows? You listen, and you have to ask powerful questions, or you have to ask questions around it to get clarity into what you're doing. So it doesn't sound all, bells and whistles, but it's the simplicity that I like so much about it. Being curious, listen, and ask powerful questions. There you go.
I love that. And I not only agree with you, if you were to ask me, Mike, what was the single most, valuable compliment you ever received in corporate America? It was me as a C-level guy. My CEO told me, Mike, more so than any of our other executives, you are insatiably professionally curious. You're always reading. You're always in our meetings. Say, hey, did you see the article in the Wall Street Journal today? Hey, did you watch, CNBC this morning? That's going to affect our industry? Blah blah blah. And I realized, he's right, because I am a voracious reader. I didn't have a business background or a business education, so I had no choice but to become a student of the business. But I'm going to ask your thoughts on this, Gary. Again, I retired from corporate America at age 57. I'm going to be 70 in July of 2026. And I'm still a student. Not a week goes by that I don't see something on LinkedIn, a post, a new book, a video, and I'm like, how have I been around the leadership space for 50 years? My first leadership role was as an 18-year-old, 50 years, and I've never seen that or heard about that. And so I realized the journey's never really over. Your thoughts?
What struck me was Jack Welch and that style, which, if you take that style today, that's not what we're seeing today. And there's just such an evolution to leadership, to be adaptable. And there is nothing in stone, but there's always going to be, that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of life, is there's always something new and different. And what I'm recognizing about myself, latching down into this program, the coaching program that I'm developing, everything I see relates back to that. And once you have that purpose or that meaning, then everything becomes crystal clear, or you recognize this book that I'm reading can translate into your next chapter coaching. Or you talk to somebody and they tell you something, you think, I need you to be more involved with me, or we need to have a follow-up phone call. But nothing ever stays still. Even, today we're sitting here in 2026 or 2025, and there's leadership, and maybe politically you love it or you don't. It's going to change, whatever it is, whether you like it or not, whether you're very in favor. But things evolve and things change. And America is just a wonderful country for that, with new thoughts, new ideas. Look at technology that's coming out, and younger kids coming out and not able to find jobs because AI is taking. And one thing that I say to younger people, because I love talking to younger people, is your intangible skills like leadership, like listening, like building trust, will always be valuable. I don't care what technology is out there to replace X, Y, or Z, because you've seen it in history before, right? That technology comes in and, well, we're not going to have any farmers because we've got this big machine. But it's the intangible skills that I think what this podcast talks about, leadership, and the intangible skills around that, and honing those intangible skills. But we're never too old to learn something new. It's just what keeps us young and vibrant, not unlike yourself.
Yeah, I love what you said. I'm going to ask an unscripted question here. The age-old discussion, if you go on Google, there must be 1,000 pages of results for this. The age-old leadership and management. Same? Different? Do leaders have to be, is there a difference between leadership and management? I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. I've asked this question of a lot of people, and I get a whole variety of answers. It's all the same, and I don't think it's the same, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on it.
Simplistically, I think one is transactional, to manage. You've got to sign this, sign that. You've got to set this person up. You have to approve X, Y, and Z. And the other is the leadership aspect of it, is how do you promote people, the intangible skills. I might say the tangible aspect is maybe the management. You've got to tick all the boxes and do all these things, submit this, submit that, and oversee this, oversee that. But when you start managing and getting into situations with people and things that aren't working out, there's no script for that. for leadership all the times. There's a script for management, and you might be able to list everything down as a manager. Here are the things that you need to do. It's like, okay, I see all that. But under leadership, there's just be a good leader. And like, well, what does that mean? Well, you'll figure it out. So I think it relates to tangible, intangible, and management can be the more tangible side, whereas leadership is the intangible side that you can't YouTube it and figure it out. Where, management, you could probably YouTube that and say, here's how to be a good manager, and ticking the boxes on things.
I agree with that. And I want to, again, go a little deeper on this. So here's, in my book, I wrote this, and I have a screenshot of the page. I put it on LinkedIn, and by far, it's the most heavily forwarded, liked, and commented on. It's just one page, and it's on this, the difference between leadership and manage. And I say, in a nutshell, you lead people and you manage things. And those things can be assets, time, money, checklists, blah, blah, blah. And I think you're going to agree with this. I think you already have alluded to it. While our leadership skills, we always can improve, they remain fairly constant. At some point, you're a good leader, and you're going to always be a good leader. Management, however, I equate it to being a doctor. A doctor that graduated med school 20 years ago probably did not know, he didn't get taught a lot of modern medicine. So while the anatomy and physiology that he studied remains the same, if he doesn't study and learn new medicine, he's very dated very quickly. And what I say is, as a leader, management technique, management requirements will grow. In other words, 10 years ago, remote workforce, almost unheard of. AI, almost unheard of. So as an old guy, if I was still leading, I'm comfortable with me as a leader, but I damn sure need to start knowing, at least at the executive level, what are we doing with AI? What's our strategy? How can help us? And so I think that while the leadership tree just needs to be pruned at some point when you reach your expertise, the management tree is a separate tree, and it grows constantly, and you have to attend to that, or you will be very quickly rendered less effective as a leader because you're not in tune with modern management requirements and practices and all of that, and you may be old enough to remember when there was no internet, no emails. We actually did business. We actually led without emails and stuff. Imagine that today and all that. So anyway, I'm blathering on. Any thoughts on this?
I'm trying to get the analogy because you mentioned a tree, and it's a good analogy. And the new branches may be different aspects of being a good manager. You start with something, and then there's new branches that come out and say, oh, I need to look at that, or AI, or work from home. What do I need to do about that? So it's constantly evolving. But the leadership part, it's like the roots of a tree of, are you good? Because the above ground is going to change. You got to roll with the punches, obviously, and you have to understand, and you got to read. You're an avid reader, so you got to read what's out there, get different perspectives. So you could be a great manager, but the leadership traits of how you go about doing that, that's a consistent, I reckon.
Yeah, and I want to follow that up with a question. You're talking about leadership traits. You've mentioned that term quite a bit already. Is there a single leadership trait that you would like to be taught to all leaders that currently is not? All
right. Good leading question, and I know I gave you the answer, so at least you're reading. But there's so much information out there about how to be a good communicator and how to speak well in public, how to have presence. There is very limited to no training to how to listen. And I had Oscar Trimboli on my podcast. He wrote the book, How to Listen. And it's just, if all leaders could go through that to recognize the importance of listening, and we've already talked about it, is teaching people how to do that, because there's all these notions that you have to be the strongest voice in the room or you have to command presence. And I can argue that a great listener can command as much presence as a great communicator if you're in a boardroom with them or if you're in a one-on-one conversation with them. So I really wish, in all areas there was ways to teach people how to listen better and then follow through with, the curious mindset. And then if you listen and you're curious, automatically questions are going to pop out. You don't even have to think about that. There's some guidelines on how to ask powerful questions, but fundamentally teach more people how to listen.
Yeah. A related question or statement on that, I absolutely agree with you. I've already mentioned that, type A meat eater, I'm forceful, I'm looking for problems to solve, to help people with and all of that. And I learned that the key to becoming a better listener was not to talk. And so I learned very early on, like in the military, if we had a meeting and the colonel was at the end of the table, if the colonel said, here's the issue and here's what I think we could do, what do you guys think? Well, what do you think we said? The colonel's already cast his vote. We're going to do what he said. Same with leadership. And I don't care if you're a team leader, a manager, a supervisor, a C-level executive. I find if you tip your hand too early, here's the problem, here's what I think we should do, good luck getting really good feedback that might be the direct opposite of what you're proposing. So I learned to shut up, force myself not to speak until the very last, because a lot of times, Gary, I went into it like, all right, I'm going to shut up. Here's the answer. This is what we're going to do. And I would say at least 50% of the time I was right, but 50% of the time I'm like, oh my God, if I had imposed my solution, it wouldn't have been as good as what Joe just said. We're going with Joe's solution. Any thoughts?
Yes. And what came to my mind is a book by Adam Grant. I believe it's called Think Again. I read a couple of his, and I think that's where it's from. But what he says is think more like a scientist. And you just get data and facts. And as you get more data and facts, your perspective may change. And that links very closely to the growth mindset. When I hear something like that, I see a fixed mindset of, I know the answer, you guys need to back me up because I'm right. And it's the opposite of being curious. It's the opposite of asking questions. But I love the idea of getting more data. In the coaching program I'm developing, we're creating LinkedIn profiles for people to connect with us. And I said, if I go 0 for 100, that's data. I got to rewrite my message. It's not that it's a bad program, because I know the program's going to work. I'm just not connected with people in the right way. And what the program needs is more data. And thinking like a scientist is great, because scientists don't get locked into whatever their perspective is. They get data to validate or contradict. They don't, oh, no, these mice are wrong because X, Y, and Z. No, the mice are doing what they're doing. And leaders will discount something if it goes against what the fixed mindset of a leader has in mind. They just discount it and get rid of it. Whereas good leaders take in the information and start using it. And those are the best leaders, in my humble opinion.
I agree. And I think that's a great analogy. I'm going to steal that from you in the future. I think that a scientist who develops a reputation for only going 5 feet deep on an issue before he says this is the way it is, vice really skinning it deeply, repeatedly, I think that guy's professional reputation is going to suffer. As well, he's a scientist, he's got all those same qualifications, but if he doesn't dig deep enough, and a lot of his statements and assertions are easily disproven had he gone another layer or two deep in research or talked to more people. Any follow-up thoughts on this?
Yeah, because we're culpable in the situation. And what I'm trying to do, and it's really difficult, is in every situation ask questions. Like that situation is a scientist comes out with information, you may ask, well, what was your data set? Who did you talk to? And as you ask questions to get information, the number that he put out isn't right. But personally, what I want to do is ask questions. If somebody says something to me, I just want to ask 2 questions. One of the rules that I have for myself When somebody asks me a question, I want to ask 2 questions back with permission, just so I can get more clarity on what it is that they're doing. So for instance, you may say, hey, Gary, you live in Vegas. Tell me about Las Vegas. And that would be, love to, Mike. What do you want to know about Las Vegas? Well, I'm not a gambler, but boy, I like food. It's like, okay, what type of food do you like? Oh, I like hole in the wall places versus 5-star places. Like, had I not asked you those 2 questions, I would have talked about things that were not pertinent to you. And you might say, hey, I love Vegas and the Strip, but I like hiking. It's like, oh, Red Rock is 5 miles from here. Let me tell you about that. But if you always ask 2 questions, here's the limiting belief that I had, and this may come up, is earlier in my career, I thought questions were confrontational. I thought if I asked somebody a question, I'm putting them on the spot, because I don't know that when I said something, I was firm in what I was asking. So it was all personal, belief in me. And now what I'm realizing is, like, it's not confrontational at all. It's clarity. Because if somebody's asking me a question, but they don't know, I'm helping them. And if they do know, then I'm going to answer the question that they want to know the answer to, like living in Las Vegas. Versus not asking any question and talking about, I could talk about 10 different things about Las Vegas. So the questions are alignment to the person, and listening is that alignment to that, and asking the question is getting clarity so that you can answer the question that they want the answer to.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Well, I've heard you on your podcast mention often about the statement of life is a pull versus a push. And I'd like you to talk about that in a little bit of depth for the audience.
Oh, thanks for that. And thanks for listening. So what I mean by that, fundamentally, you push down on your career. You push down on learning, getting better, and this gets into the selfish thing. You focus on what you like, where you want to go. If you do that, the knock-on effect is you will get pulled up in your career. Like I said, I'm a grinder, right? Didn't come through a big university. So my biggest benefit, my biggest asset was my attitude. And what I noticed in my career, leaders would pull me to positions. They would promote me before I thought I wanted to. They would send me over to China just because I asked. And the fundamental theme that I have in that, at least when I talk to young people, is focus on you and getting better with yourself. And leaders are going to recognize that and want to pull you in places, because being in management consulting, if there was a team member that I liked, I would run through a wall to get that person a promotion because they were just so good. And that's what I feel you need in business, is the recognition of somebody in a position of power that can pull you up to places. It's your job to be really good at what you're doing, to have the best attitude that you can, but have the relational skills with leaders, connect with somebody, but fundamentally do what you like to do and do it really well, and have a world-class attitude. I always say you hire, I'm going to muck it up. You hire for skill, you hire for will, you train for skill. That's it. Yeah. You hire for will, you train for skill. It's probably a military thing. But that's what I came with, because that's what I recognize is people pulled me up in my career and they recognized me. And, I didn't ask for it. I wasn't pushing for it. When you try to push yourself into a place where they don't want you, like, you need to make me a partner, otherwise I'm leaving. That's not a good recipe for success. As you continue to do what you do well, good things are going to happen. But you can't push yourself into a place where nobody wants you. So push down on yourself, because you can only control yourself. That's the only thing you can control. You can't control your promotion, can't control anything else, because there are all kinds of circumstances that'll dictate whether you get promoted or not. But you can always control you. So focus on that.
Thank you. We're big in the leadership space about assessing ourselves as leaders and turning our weaknesses into strengths. And I would like to turn that coin around a little bit and ask you, was there ever a situation in your professional career where you actually, one of your strengths actually turned to prove to be a weakness at some point?
It's what I've been talking about, in that my ability just to say yes to everything and get there and go do it. Gary, we want you to do this. We want you to do that. Great, I'll do it because I thought that was my value. Well, it starts turning in your professional career when you get into a leadership position. You have to be more curious and ask questions. You don't blindly just say, yes, I'll do it, because I thought I was being a good soldier. So this happened probably in China, and it happened right before I went to Australia. The wonderful story that I have about this is I'm going to tie back to, I just wanted to go see the world. Right. So I'm lining up a job in Australia, and what do I advocate for? Listening and asking questions. I didn't ask a lot of questions as I was going there, because my value was I'm a grinder. I'm going to roll up my sleeves and get stuff done. That's what I do. So doesn't matter what you want me to do. That's my strength. And I know I'm going to get in there and do it. That turned into a massive weakness because I wasn't set up for success in Australia, just based on the structure. I don't want to get too much in the details, but the structure of what they were asking me for, it was nearly impossible. All I had to do was ask a few questions to get clarity and say, okay, how do you expect me to do that when these things aren't in place? Or what are we going to do to put these things in place? So it ties in everything. My strength was a grinder. I'm going to roll up my sleeves and do everything. It ties into ask good, clarifying questions. That's all I would have had to have done. My fear was if I asked questions, they might realize it was impossible and say, you know what, I guess we don't need you. So we don't need you to come down here. Fundamentally, that was my big fear, because I just wanted to go work in Australia. I mean, who doesn't, right? Yeah. So I felt those questions would be confrontational. They would recognize that that wasn't where they would want to go. And my biggest strength was yes, can do, turned into a weakness because I wasn't able to deliver on the initial expectations of what they wanted me to do down there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I want to follow that up with an ad lib question too. I understand completely what you're saying. And here's my statement. I think that that a leader that has that knee-jerk tendency to say yes to anything, yes, my team can do this, yes, we can do this, runs a real risk of team and individual failure. And I learned over time, the guy that really taught me how to be a listener by example, he told me, Mike, instead of saying yes or no, we know we have tasked your departments. You know, I was in charge of almost the whole back office, HR, marketing, IT, and we ran a hard pace. Always tell us we can do that, but here's what it's going to take for me to be able to say yes to that. I'm going to need more resources in the form of people, consultants, money, time, some of these other priorities you might have to move back a little bit. That's what you're going to have to do for me to honestly say yes to this one right here. And I would say when I said what the cost was of saying yes, and 75% of the times they would say, yeah, we'll do that next year. You're already overloaded and we're not going to give you more bodies. You know, we're watching our costs and things like that. Any thoughts on this? The issue of being a good soldier is a requirement, but saying yes to everything automatically is not being a good soldier. It could actually be a destructive soldier to you and your team.
But that right there is a great leadership trait, because you're protecting yourself, you're protecting what they're asking you to do, and you're protecting your team with thoughtful questions. Because if you say yes to everything and burden the team, your credibility with your team goes down. It's like, we can't take on anymore. Now, if you hear that question, you go back to your team and say, hey, here's what's being asked. How can we make that work? And that could help form the parameters of, here's what's going to get me to yes. This, and this. And that's a great leadership trait. If I'm a leader going down to somebody else, that's what I want to hear. I don't want to hear a blind yes, because you're like, oh, shoot, you're not busy enough. Okay, that's not good. So I feel like I'm failing. Or if you say no too flippantly, that's not a good trait as well. It's always, here's how to get me to yes. And that's so thoughtful because it says so much about you and the leadership and listening to your team. And I think it's a wonderful approach to go through and ask for something. So blindly saying yes, which highlights how horrible of a leader how not as good as a leader I wanted to be. But that, trust me, I wasn't that great, and I know it. And I did my best, and I did some things well, and I recognize my failures and a lot. But that's a wonderful thing. Here's what's going to get me to yes.
Well, you and me both, my friend. I got to tell you, when I coach clients, I say, all right, I see the situation. Let me tell you what not to do, because I did this 30 years ago and they should have fired me for that. So a lot of my teaching is I've had some successes, but I've made some doozies that I don't really want to tell people about. They were so embarrassing, inept, So
this is why we're high on the happiness curve right now. You're higher than I am on the happiness curve. And it's so true, because we take all this wisdom of our lives, recognize it. And, we're self-deprecating people. It feels like, what a disaster I was. And you just learn from it and say, okay. And you just smile. And I always tell people I'm living the life that I built for myself. And what else can you say? I don't have any regrets on really anything. I wish I would have done things differently, but all that helps form who I am today. And it's just such a wonderful journey life is, and the career that I've had. I'm just so grateful to everybody else to get back to the pull. But a lot of people have pulled me along in my career, and I couldn't be happier and more grateful for them.
Well, thank you for that. Our time is running short, but I want to ask you this question, because you are a coach. As an executive coach, I find that a lot of younger leaders or aspiring leaders in their 20s, 30s, even 40s are like, yeah, Mike, I'll get to coaching when I'm an executive. That's for older guys. And I tell them, the earlier that you develop role models, mentors, and get with coaches, formal or informal, the better off you'll be. That could be the difference between becoming an executive one day or not. So your thoughts on the benefit and the importance of younger folks, 20s to 40s, really getting, role models, which could be, long dead, but mentors, and there could be different mentors for different skills and topics, and then actually investing in coaching themselves, and getting a coach. Your thoughts on the merit of doing it and not waiting till your 50s and 60s, which is really the average age of my clients.
So if the question is trying to convince people in their 20s to 40s to invest in a coach, if that's the question, I want to go over to, I saw David Clutterbuck speak. He's probably pretty renowned in the executive coaching aspect. He shared with us, he had 11-year-olds coaching 9-year-olds. Coaching 11-year-olds coaching 9-year-olds. He's in the UK. And there is nothing more powerful than an individual at any age recognizing what was happening, not being told what was happening, not being given advice. All mentors are great, family members are great, but there's nothing like a coaching relationship. And the earlier you learn how to leverage a coach, because you get in your 50s and 60s, like, how do I use you? But if you've been brought up with it in your 20s, you know how to use a coach, because there's so much inside of you that just needs to get unlocked through a powerful question from a coach. And that relationship is unlike any other that you'll ever have in your life, because a great coach has no destination for you. They're not, they're not bought into a perspective on you. Your parents are, your loved ones are, and that's all wonderful. But most people have a perspective on you as an individual, whereas a great coach doesn't. And it's just trying to help you unpack what's inside of you. So the earlier you start getting it, by the time you hit your 50, you're going to be dancing, because you understand the relationship and how to use it.
Yeah, I love that. And that 11-year-old, 9-year-old thing is very analogous to the military, specifically the Marine Corps, where, out of high school, a year into it, the ranks are private, PFC, Lance Corporal, Corporal Sergeant, the junior ranks. So, a year into it, I'm a Lance Corporal with a year in the Marine Corps. And I can remember getting tightened up one time by my sergeant because one of the privates and PFCs did something wrong. And he said, Ettore, what the hell's wrong with you? You know better than that. Why didn't you teach him the right way to do it? And that was the day I realized Just because I'm not in a leadership role in this organization, everybody is held accountable to lead to their ability and their experience. And that guy said, why are you waiting for me, a sergeant with 8 years in, to teach and mentor that guy? Stop him from doing that. And you knew 6 months in. Well, he's only got 3 months in. Don't do that again. Oh, okay. So I love the analogy. I can't let you out of here, Gary. Our time is really coming to an end. I got to ask you the fantasy question I ask everybody. And that is, if you were given the opportunity to bring back one leader from the past and spend a day with that person, who would you choose and why?
So I want to answer that, but can I give you a quick example of how to coach and something that people can practice straight away? I'm a big sports guy. So if you're a dad or a father or a mother and your son or daughter is playing sports and they're playing baseball, and say they went 5 for 5, got 5 hits and 5 at bats, a good coach or things you can practice with them and say, hey, you had a great game. Tell me about what you were thinking. How'd you feel today? What went well? What was your mindset when you were going up to bat? Because you were 5 for 5, and just ask them questions so they can think through that. Or, a day where they didn't do well. It's like, what happened today? Remember you when you were 5 for 5? Yeah. Well, what happened today? Well, and they'll tell you what happened. Oh, I didn't get sleep, or I did this. But start coaching your kids early, and not as a parent, because we always want what's best for the kids. But just start asking them questions. So just wanted to squeeze that in there. But I thought a little bit about this. I didn't want to give you a standard answer with, Steve Jobs or Jack Welch or whomever. So as I get older, I'm trending into Stoicism, and Marcus Aurelius is something. He wrote the Meditations, and he was Emperor Caesar, a bunch of times. So he's a great leader, and it just struck me. It just got simpler and simpler over time. One of the quotes I love is "Knowledge speaks and wisdom listens," and I just would love to talk to him about how you get into the mindset, what was going on with it, because life had to be so simple, back then, and I would just be curious about the journey, how he discovered it. I would ask him almost similar to what you're asking me as you look back, what mistakes did you make, or where do you think that all this started clicking in, or what was the impetus for this? Or if you were to impart wisdom on, say, me, what perspective would you have for me to follow more Stoicism, or what's the mindset that I would need to have? But I think that would be a good conversation. Some good Italian food and some wine.
Well, I absolutely agree. I am a huge fan of Stoicism. In fact, I wrote a book on it. I don't claim to be a scholar, but I found out early on as a Marine. I read an article about, I don't know if you're familiar with, it was a famous Navy admiral named Stockdale, Admiral Stockdale, and he was a scholar when it come to Stoicism. He got shot down and spent 7 years in solitary confinement in the Hanoi Hilton. And he said, as he got shot down, he was going down in his parachute. He said, all right, this is at least 3 years in the world of Socrates. In other words, if there's ever a time you're going to need to really control your mind and your thoughts and hope for the best, it's this time. And so he actually, there's something, you might have heard of this. If not, just Google it, Gary, called the Stockdale paradox. And he said time and again, somebody asked him on like an interview, all right, in the Hanoi Hilton, it was infamous, brutal torture, maltreatment, starving you. Who made it through? And he said, I can tell you who didn't make it through. The optimists. And they're like, what? I would have thought it was the optimist who said, well, get out of here. He goes, nope. The optimist said, we'll be out of here by Christmas. And then Christmas didn't come. Well, Thanksgiving. And he said those guys were so hopeful and their hopes got dashed again. And they shriveled up and died. Their lack of will, they died. And you're not insulting them. He said, I realized I am a POW in this rat hole. It will end someday. I really believe that. I will see my wife and children again. But it's not going to be anytime soon, probably. And he said that single frame of mind is what got him through, and the others, what got the others through. So I'll send you a copy of the book for what it's worth. I'm just fascinated by it. And to your point, knowledge speaks, wisdom listens. I call them the wise old men, Gary. Those guys had things figured out thousands of years ago. And I've yet to find a human situation or condition or problem that they hadn't already thought about and said, think about this. I mean, they really did. All we have to do strategically is listen to them, tactically listen to others. I mean, I think every personal and professional problem that we can ever possibly make has already been made millions of times by others, and all we have to do is cast a wide net, and we can avoid so much pain in our lives.
Well, the pain is a great teacher, right?
Yeah.
And
I'll tell you something. I had much pain thrust upon me, my friend. You know what I mean?
and you're the smartest one on this call, that's for sure. I would say that Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, same thing.
Yes.
Exact same thing.
Yeah, he got so good. He said he could tell when they got off the train. That guy won't make it. That guy's going to, just by the look on their face and their body language and all of that, you know? Yeah, it's a classic work there, you know?
Yep. Yeah, I just read that. And the reason why, the Stoics way back then, Marcus, they didn't have Netflix. So what else are they supposed to do?
Right. Yeah.
Just got to sit there and think and drink, so they didn't have any competing priorities or sports. Well, they did have their own sports, but it wasn't like ours.
Yeah. But, a final thought and question, I say this about leadership. Leadership is really the best leaders get at least adequate, but effective early on in the human condition, human nature. And I submit, while society, the world has changed so much, mankind has changed, but human nature has never changed and never will, I say. So are those wise old men still relevant today? I think they're highly relevant. They don't know about the internet and work remote. They didn't even know about gunpowder and all of that. They were ancient. But when it comes to person-to-person, individual problems, controlling our thoughts, I think they had it mastered back then. And I think they're all highly relevant today. And I'll leave you with that. Your thoughts?
Well, it's the basics. It's stripping things away. But, I always say nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's what I'm searching for, is minimalism or just stripping things away. We don't need a lot. You just need the basics, and to grind down into what those are, then you're going to be fine. Because there's just too many, call it distractions, that can take you away from the basics. But ground down on the basics, and you're thinking about Caesar and Marcus Aurelius and what he was doing, who was controlling. It's like he just keeps it all simple, right? Yeah. So I love it.
Exactly. Well, listen, this is going to be a great episode. And I think people are going to want to reach out to you. So how do people find you, contact you if they want to?
Yep. LinkedIn, it's Gary P. Nowak. The P is in Philip. And then my website, GaryNowak.com, GaryNowak.com. Check me out there. You can reach out to me on there if you want to set up calls or talk. If something struck you, I love talking about executive coaching. I love talking about the Your Next Chapter. So if anything struck you and you want to have a deeper conversation, I would love to hear from you.
Great. Well, again, Gary, I can't thank you enough for doing this. I can tell this is going to be a popular podcast. I don't know if you see me. I've been taking notes, while you're talking. So thank you so much. And I respectfully ask that you consider coming back and doing another one day. I know I just scratched the surface in all of your wisdom and expertise. So with that, my friend, thank you, and go forth and I wish you all the success in the world. You're already having it, but I wish you many more years of impacting others as you're doing.
Thanks, Mike. And I think I can return the favor and invite you on my podcast to talk about executive coaching. So we can look forward to that episode.
I would love to do it. All right. Be well, Gary.
Okay. Thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Please subscribe, rate, review, and recommend to your friends. Please visit our website at fidelisleadership.com and sign up for our leadership newsletter. Until next time, remember the words of the ancient Greek philosopher Pericles.
What you leave behind is not what is engraved in stone monuments, but is woven in the lives of others.